Hello folks, you're all very welcome back to the Celtic Soul Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks very much for listening to us over the past couple of years. And it's great to be out of lockdown now and back in the real world and meeting people and going to games and the pub and discos and gigs. And I'm sure my guest today is enjoying being back out. I know he's out on the golf course as well a lot. I think it was out with John Hartson last week talking maybe about referees, but then again we leave that for John to talk about. Folks, my guest today on the show is one of the men who stopped the 10 in a row. Spent a number of years at Celtic, from a young man to before he went down to the riches of the Premier League in the south of England with Sheffield Wednesday. Joining me, folks, is Simon Donnelly. Simon, you're very welcome to the podcast.
How you doing, mate? You okay?
Yeah, good, Simon. Simon, the last time I spoke to you was, I think it was the night we played Celta Vigo, or in and around that time before Christmas. But you were just after finally getting the big night with Henrik and John and Sutty and Martin O'Neill wrapped up in the Hydro. What a night. Yeah. So first of all, a big applause for that one.
Yeah, it was brilliant, mate. Obviously, we'd had it in the diary from a year or so before, and everything, as you just mentioned there, with lockdown and stuff, it had to get put back. I think 3 or 4 times it get put back. So there was always a worry, because you're always looking at Henrik's diary and seeing if the next date's going to suit everybody. But the night turned out to be a great night. You know, it was a great turnout at the Hydro. It was good to see all the boys. It wasn't quite, there was a few that I played with, but it was more, I would say, the kind of Martin O'Neill 2003 squad. It was good to watch them behind the scenes in the green room, just catching up. So it was a really good night. I think everybody enjoyed it, from the fans to the guys that were actually involved on the stage.
Yeah, and after we ended up back in the hotel, and I was speaking to your former assistant manager, Murdo McLeod, and he'd been recently had met Wim Jansen, his old buddy, and unfortunately Wim passed away shortly after that. Now the book is out in Dutch. I don't think there's an English version out yet, but hopefully there will be. Just I
think they're in the process of translating it.
Yeah, because it'd be well worth the read for us. Now we're in a title run in now with a new manager, Ange Postecoglou, who came from Japan, and not a lot of us knew a lot about him. And probably the same when Wim Jansen arrived to the club. I think maybe the foundations was maybe better, because Tommy had almost won the league. Tommy had built up a decent squad. But, you know, you're losing this iconic Celtic manager. You're also losing an iconic Celtic captain. And then you have a manager coming in that you don't know a lot about, and he comes in late, and you lose your first 2 games. So what was in the league? What was the first impressions of Wim when he came in?
Well, it's funny that you mention all that, because I think, obviously, I've been asked plenty of times this season. This season reflects quite a lot of similarities. And just as you touched on there, you know, a manager coming into a club, I'd never heard of Wim Jansen, and I look back now, it's slightly ignorant of myself and others that we didn't know who he was, because this guy played in 2 World Cup finals, you know, a final legend. But we just didn't know about him. But as soon as he came to the club, I remember him, he turned up when we were in pre-season. I think Murdo, as you're saying there, had taken us over to Holland or Germany, I can't remember where it was. And he was taking the pre-season until Wim turned up. And there was a lot of speculation with other names at the time. And when Wim arrived, I just remember this figure cutting across the training ground with it was a horrible Celtic kind of shell suit tracksuit that we had, that it was like an oven when you wore it. So he had this on and his curly hair, and that was my first images, and it sticks in my mind with him. But really, from the off, I just liked his manner. He was a very calm guy. His training was really good. Everything was from day one with the ball. It was all intense, but it was all ball work. And I just enjoyed working for the guy. As I say, what an impact he had that year. You're touching on Tommy there as well. Tommy obviously had a fiery side to him. And I don't know, looking back on it, Wim's kind of calm influence coming in that year. He was an outsider to Celtic. You know, he didn't have any kind of links to Celtic. And just the way he went about it probably helped us a wee bit. And obviously, the recruitment again, similar to Ange this year, bringing in 7, 8, 9 new players and having to gel pretty quickly. And obviously, there was a Mr. Larson in amongst those guys that were brought in.
And Simon, I'm just when you mentioned the players there that he brought in Darren Jackson, Craig Bowley, Stephen Mahy, Henrik Larsson, Reggie Blinker, Jonathan Gould, Mark Reaper, Paul Lambert, Harold Bradback and Kevin Picklington. And out went Paul because he retired. Paddy Kelly, Brian O'Neill and Paolo Di Canio, they went out. So it was a huge upheaval at the club. And I suppose, like, you might be able to answer this, like Ange was kind of, when players got injured early on in the season, you know, you looked at the bench and we were down to the bare bones of the squad. Then he freshened it up in January, which is sometimes hard to do. Now, back then, I don't think there was the window. So, but look at this, players come in. Paul Lambert came in November. Harold came in December.
Yeah.
Was the arrival of Paul Lambert like a Champions League winner? Was that a really good thing to come into the dressing rooms?
Yeah, I think so. Him and Burley in the middle of the park, because you're talking about obviously Paul McStay leaving and stuff. I mean, Paul was an unbelievably good player that I was lucky enough to play with for a couple of seasons. But you look at that engine room, and Burley came in and Lambert, and they really became the mainstay, you know, that we built the rest of the team round. Obviously, you had Henrik up top, Big Reaper coming in, playing the Stubbs and Boyd at the back. So we did have the basis of a good team, but it always takes a little bit of time. I mean, you touched on there, we lost our first 2 games, which is incredible. When you look at Ange this season, very similar, I think 3 out of the first 4 or something like that. So we lost our first 2 games, the second one being at Celtic Park against Dunfermline. And I can't remember totally, but there must have been a hell of a lot of pressure on us. You know, there must have been people out there, you know what it's like in football, question marks, have they appointed the right guy? Unfortunately for us, we went up to McDermott Park midweek to play St Johnstone in a cup game, and we won that, and then we followed that up with another league win up there on the Saturday. Difficult place to go, St Johnstone at the time, so that was 2 kind of, we stemmed the flow, we stopped the losses there, and then not long after that, I think the European experiences, we got Liverpool in the UEFA Cup. And I remember thinking at that time, you know, we went out and away goals, but we really, anybody that was in the games would probably agree that we were pushing for 3-1 when McManaman breaks away and scores for the second goal. And then we had chances, myself included, down at Anfield. So I came away from those games, you know, with a real confidence, thinking we've got the basis of a right good side here that can go and maybe do something this season. So slowly but surely we started to kick on. Lambo coming in, he said they're a Champions League winner. I knew what the guy could do anyway. Scotland and watching him playing with Motherwell before, fantastic football player, brought a huge bit of experience. And then Harold late on as well, which again at the time I'd had a short spell up front with Henrik for about maybe 8 or 9 games, which I absolutely loved to this day. You know, the experience was brilliant. But then the team had to be tweaked again. I think Jackie had an injury. I found myself on the right-hand side. Harold was playing through the middle with Henrik at this point. So throughout the season, there was different periods, different, you know, roles to be done within the team. But I keep saying to folk, it's a movie. That season in itself is a movie, because for all the wholesale changes at the start, the terrible start we got off to, and to go right down to the wire, it's a movie in the making. Yeah, and Vim moving on as well, winning the league and then moving on and only being there 1 season.
Yeah, but you mentioned the players that you brought in. Mark Reaper, quality.
Yeah.
Paul Lambert and Craig Bowley was he was player of the year that year, if I think back.
16 goals he scored in midfield.
Yeah, unbelievable. And then Henrik, of course, up front. You know, I know he's made Chick Charlie famous, but you know, what was your impressions? Our first impression was, who's this guy? You know, again, ignorance on our behalf, you know, because what...
Yeah, I knew Henrik from I remember Sweden doing really well in the 1994 World Cup. I think they got to the 3rd and 4th playoff against Bulgaria. And I remember him because the deadlocks, he stuck out. I think he scored in that game. So I knew of him, but that was all I really knew from that 94 World Cup. But when he came in, you could tell how good he was. And yeah, he got off to he blames Darren Jackson for that pass. He blames Darren for not showing for him. But, his quality was there. And remarkably, he only got 19 goals that season. When you look back, I think Celtic and Henrik were made for each other. I mean, when I moved on, I think when I watched Celtic after I'd moved to Sheffield Wednesday, I think his levels just kept going up. It was just a perfect platform, a perfect club for him to come. He was worshipped and he felt at home there, and it brought out the best in him. Because I think before he came at Feyenoord, whatever was happening there, I think he was maybe getting stuck out on the right. Wim knew all this. Wim knew that he wasn't happy, but he also knew what he was getting as a player. If he could get him to Celtic, get him enjoying his football and get him playing in the right position, and the rest is history. But that season he got 19, which is still good for a first season, but when you think about the 40s and the 50s that he went on to, he just kept getting better.
And did you see that, in those early days? Did you
I did. See, the little spell I had, I ended up playing up front with him through default. We had to play Tyrrell in Europe, and Darren Jackson was in the starting 11. And Darren then had his head issue. Remember, he had to get an operation. So he fell ill on the bus, I think for Cameron House or wherever we were. He fell ill on the way up to the game. Typically no sympathy for the squad. They're saying, he's chucked one in here, he doesn't fancy it tonight. But obviously Darren was seriously ill. And I remember them coming to me and saying, look, I'm going to play you. Darren's not fit to play, I'm going to start you with Henrik. And I played well that night. I scored 2 goals and won my place in the team for the next wee bit. And for that spell, as I say, I was up front with Henrik. And it brings the best out in you. But see, when you're playing with really clever players like that, I mean, I started off with Charlie Nicholas, who I think it was coming to the end of his career, but a fantastic football player. See, when you play with guys like that, it just makes your job easier. And it's, little clever things like round the corner, and he knows what you're going to do, and vice versa. And I really look back in that period as a real fond highlight of my time at Celtic, because it was the best for me, the best I played with. So that little period was great. And then, as I say, Harold came to the club. Vim obviously felt he needed another striker. Harold became available. And then I found myself out on the right. But basically, again, because Jackie normally played on the right, Jackie was injured for a spell. So you were just grateful to play anywhere. But the little period that we had, maybe 10 to 12 games with Henrik, was an absolute joy.
Yeah, and if memory serves me right, we'd gone to Ibrox, we'd lost, we'd drawn with them at Celtic Park in November. And then we had the New Year's game, which I thought was a huge turning point, because we were at it that day, the 2-0, and the midfield, Boldy and Lambert were brilliant that day. Yeah.
No, that was a massive one, and I didn't realise, but I think I was told recently that if we'd get beat that day, we were slipping maybe 7 points behind Rangers. So it was a big result. Looking back, 2 great goals. Lambo's just took the roof off. But that was a big statement from us, saying that we're in this for the distance. We're not going away. And when you look back, there's certain results over that season that are really significant. That's one of them.
Yeah, and if we just got fast forward to this season and the similarities, Ange didn't have he started well, and then we had a blip, and then he went on a great run. But even coming in, that Christmas run and that, I remember someone saying to me, if we're in touching distance with Rangers, we can win this league. And another mate saying, all the first half of the season, he was saying, we're not gonna. But there's just not enough there. And he was talking about the bench and that. And I said, there's another transfer window. And again, he says, it's a shy time. January, terrible. He says, we'll get some duds in that. But we didn't. We were lucky enough. I suppose we were very lucky that Ange knew the Japanese league, and they play different months to us. So, like, did you think that he would turn it around so quick?
From the start of the season?
Yeah.
No, I really didn't. I go back, and it's probably wrong for me to judge, but I went back to the game at Tynecastle, where I think Kyogo documented just well off a flight, and they get beat. And I sat there, I watched the game with my kids, and I thought to myself, this could be a really long season. You know, this guy's going to need a bit of time. But that, my mind was changed quite quickly after that, albeit a couple of defeats. I know he took a couple of heavy defeats in Europe, but I like that approach. I like going toe to toe, if you like. And the Betis game was a classic highlight. Celtic could have been 3-0 up or 3-1 up out of sight, and then obviously they came back. But I liked this attitude of, we're going to go out and try and beat the opposition. We're not going to sit. And that's what I said at the time. I said, this will be a really exciting season for Celtic, because win or lose, they're going to be attacking. There's going to be goals. There's going to be incidents. And I think I've been proved right. I didn't expect him to turn. I'm probably of the same thinking that, if you were still in touch around about this time, it'd be a different pressure for the Rangers team to handle, because last season, after the turn of the year, with the disappointment of the game at New Year against them, I think they more or less ran away with it after that. They didn't have any real pressure. You go back to the title that I won in '98, where it's neck and neck. It's a different pressure. You feel it breathing down your neck, and you feel as if you can't slip up. And that changes within games, because you know what your rivals are doing. So it's a whole different ball game. So I thought if Celtic were in touch at this time of the year, it'd be very interesting. But lo and behold, they're 6 points clear with a huge goal difference in an unbelievably strong position. It's full credit to the guy coming in, the recruitment, the players that have come in and hit the ground. Nearly, I don't think there's been a failure with any of the guys that he's brought in. They've all contributed at different times. And again, with him working in a different market, in a different environment, he knew what he was getting with Kyogo. I think that would probably have just been re-emphasised to him how good a first half of the season Kyogo had, to go and dip into that market again. And the advantage I think he had over everybody else, you talk about that winter transfer window, he knew what he was after. He probably identified those guys at the start of the season, but they just wouldn't be available then. So he knew what he was getting, and they've come in and they've lifted it. And I know, speaking from experience, you talk about Lambo there that year, when good players join your team, it lifts everybody. And that's been evident. That's been witnessed at Celtic right throughout the season.
Yeah, and the bench now, as we go into the business end of the season, it's like there's a couple of positions up for grabs, which is brilliant, because competition is so healthy.
It is, and you look back to, was it St Mirren just at the turn of the year when the bench wasn't particularly strong and Celtic kind of huffed and puffed and couldn't really get going that night. And now you look at it, and with Giakoumakis back fit last week, you look to the game on Sunday, and I'm already thinking, what's he going to do up top? Because for me, Giakoumakis is in a great second half of the season. Once he got over the injury stuff and started to get a regular game, he's become a real number 9 for us. I still think Kyogo's the best striker that Celtic have got. Can you fit these two into the same team? I know people were kind of moaning a wee bit when Kyogo played out on the wide against Rangers in the first game, but I would love to see these two in the team, in the starting 11. I don't know how you fit them in, because I know he loves Maeda. Maeda's been terrific. Jota looked as if he was back to his best at Dingwall, where it popped up with a goal. These are good headaches to have now, though. And he's got these guys, Abada, he's got these guys there. Midfield, O'Reilly and Rogic, very similar. He seems to be shuffling them about rather than playing together. But these are all good options now he's got, and it'll be interesting to see what they go with on Sunday.
Yeah, and it looks like I don't like as a Celtic fan, like there's not as much. I don't feel the pressure that we felt back in this when the year we stopped at 10, because there was so much riding on it.
Yeah.
So like, and I'm quietly confident, but I'm sure I will be a bit nervous before kick-off or travelling over on Sunday when you're having a point to settle the nerves, because it'll be a bit early.
I think the game at Dingwall last week was massive, because I covered the St Johnstone game when they won 7-0, and I went into the semi-final thinking, if these guys perform like that, I know St Johnstone's a different level to Rangers, if these guys perform like that, they'll win. But there was also a wee bit at the back of my mind saying that doesn't always work in this fixture. Sometimes it's if you're overconfident, or if you feel, Celtic should win this one, sometimes goes the other way. And it proved to be the case. But the big one for me was Dingwall, because the next game is obviously Sunday. And if you slip up and the momentum goes the other way, things can turn around and unravel quite quickly. So it was important to get that job done last week and keep that gap going into this game. And now the incentive going into the game on your home soil is win it, and you've virtually won the league.
Yeah.
So I thought Dingwall was a great bounce back. I don't think they were at their best, but they got the job done, and that's what it's all about with 4 or 5 games left.
But it could have been all over at half time if Kyogo.
There was chances in it, yeah. But the longer it goes at 1-0, you talk about nerves. The longer it goes at 1-0, and their keeper makes a couple of great saves, a couple of chances missed. It's like the 1-0 was against St Johnstone on the last game of the season. It's 1-0. That first half, I watched that back in lockdown. We had loads of chances, and we could have put the game to bed in the first half. But as soon as the second half started, you could see the nerves within the team. It was misplaced passes. Everybody was a wee bit more nervy. You could tell by the crowd that Rangers were getting a result, I think, at Tannadice. So, it's a crucial, important time of the season. And within games, the momentum can change. So it was really important to get over the line with that and keep that gap going into this game. It puts you in a really strong position.
And we were neck and neck with Rangers coming up to that stop in the 10. And we kind of stumbled. I think there was 2 draws, Hibs and then the trip to Dunfermline when we could have won the league, and everybody from the south of Ireland had to drive up to the top of the north of Ireland to get the game, to listen to the game. That's how. That's long before all social media and you can see anything now within an instant on Twitter. You can see a goal, but you're going into was the nerves was dripping in? Was there any doubt? Like you talked there about half time. You're 1-0 up at half time. Can you remember what Wim said to you?
I can't, mate. I really can't. I remember as a performance, because I was watching myself. Obviously, Harold came on for me. He gets the second goal, but I came off for Harold maybe midway through the second half. I could already tell by then that there was wee bits within my own game watching it that just trying a wee bit too hard and things weren't happening, especially after Henrik scoring so early. Normally a game like that, you'd go and win it 3 or 4-0, and it would be, everybody would have the cigars out and it would be an easy, comfortable afternoon, but it just wasn't that. And it was just adding to the stress factor. And I did see the team after half time, beginning to feel it a wee bit. So I suppose you just have to hang in. The second goal is a great goal. It's a well-worked goal, but just total relief, I think, from every fan to every member of the team to the guys in the dugout when the second goal went in, was just a relief, because then that was the only minute that we realised it's ours now, it's ours. And it's actually giving me goosebumps thinking about it, because the week before, when Kilmarnock got the late goal against Rangers, I was immediately on the phone to Jackie, because all of a sudden that was the first time it was in our hands. You say go to East End Park the next day and win it, which we should have. But the following week when we got to 2-0, it was like, that's it, done. There's no way St Johnstone are scoring 2 goals against us.
And you talk about goosebumps. It was a decade. We waited a decade. You know, like when I started, you know, following Celtic, that was the first team that I'd seen was the centenary team. You know, this iconic manager, legend of the club, and the players. You know, you remember all those players. But you know, in 10 years, like if someone said, you know, name the team from '93, you will name it, but it's not going to rhyme off. And all of a sudden, that team that stopped at 10 become 10 years. You've now got a new set of legends.
The more I think about it, it's a big season in Celtic's history, and it's an absolute privilege, you know, for me to say that I played my part in it. I look back at '95. I won my first medal for Celtic in 1995 Scottish Cup, and I remember from that day, McStay, Burns, Stark, Grant. I remember their reaction at winning the game, and I thought at the time, I probably didn't think much of it at the time, but now when I give it more thought, these guys were all used to winning in that era that you talk about, 88s, 89s, earlier than that, you know, winning Scottish Cups, winning leagues, doing the double in 88. It was a long time for a club like Celtic to wait for the next trophy. And then you add in Tommy Burns, the Celtic legend, back as manager, his first trophy, and I think it was maybe Paul McStay's first as a captain. So these are big moments, and I just look back now and say, I'm so lucky to have been involved in them. But when you get to the 98 one, and it's trying to keep a record from Celtic's best team of all time and try and preserve that against your greatest rivals, it's a big season in Celtic's history. It's a saying, I probably only think about it more now than I did then. Then I would have been 23, 24, and I'd have loved it. And I remember the relief getting over the line. But I think I appreciate it a lot more nowadays.
Yeah, and this is one thing that's always stuck in my mind. Wim left, he spoke after the game and he said, I'll be making a decision, and I've only told me, only my wife knows, but today is not the day to say it. So that hinted that he was gone. Now, at the time, I don't think anyone really realised, because to be honest, we were all at down the Gallagate partying. It was a beautiful sunny evening, and the party continued into the city. And I'm sure you had a great party as well, because we're probably all around the same vintage, and we had less miles in the clock then. So partying was a bit easier, especially the next morning.
Yeah, a lot easier.
But then did you know that his relationship with Jock Brown was not good?
No,
he kept that away from the players.
I think maybe some of the more, so you've got 20 players, 25 players, so you'd have different players have different relationships with them. I remember Lambo having a lot of conversation with him. Lambo was an older player than myself. He would always be in conversation with him at training. I was one of the younger boys. I would only maybe have conversation with him if it was directly, you know, like that Tyrrell game, right, you're going to play tonight or whatever. So I didn't really know about any of the stuff behind the scenes. And then we went to Portugal a day or so after that title win. It was to do with the George Cadet signing. We had to play Sporting Lisbon in a friendly. Of all the times to go and do that. So you can imagine the state of us when we were trying to play in that game. But we get pulled into somebody's bedroom in the hotel. I think it might have been Lambo's as a squad, and that was when we were told that Wim he was no longer going to stay. So it's a shame, because he never really, there's probably credit to him, he's never really came out and gave his story since. Maybe in the book, I've not seen his book, but maybe in the book that tells you. And certainly recently, you know, when we knew his health hadn't been great, Murdo had been over, and at the start of the podcast there, we're talking about the night of the Hideout. We had hoped to get him over, and not even to have to speak, just to go out on the stage and take the acclaim of the fans, because it had been such a lovely moment. But his health was deteriorating at that time. He wasn't healthy enough, and we never get round to doing it, which is a real shame. But maybe something in his book will reveal everything with it. But what a legacy! What if you're going to come and make an impact? What a season to do it!
Yeah, and we were high, we were probably still drunk when he did. When these announcements were made, as I'm sure you went on top form in that game either.
Oh.
But you explain this to younger listeners. This would be the equivalent of Ange winning the league this year. He's won the League Cup. He's done a double, and then he on the last day of the season he comes out and he says, "Listen, I'm off." Like we would be so deflated, and I think probably that gives the momentum to your rivals again. Then doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, Rangers obviously went and won the league the year after as well, and that's nothing to do with like Dr. Joe coming in, because he had his own skills and a great, lovely man, Dr. Joe, and obviously brought another absolute gem to our club in Lubo Moravcik, which might not have happened if them had stayed on. It just be things like that. It's a movie in itself, that season. It really is. The more I think about it and everything that was at stake and all the new players that came in and the fact that he left after it, it's an incredible story.
Yeah, it would be lovely to have a night like you had with Martin O'Neill's 2003 team for fans to go back and see, because some of them players I mentioned, we wouldn't have seen them in many years, So
the good things with these things as well, it's the same with the testimonials or the charity games. You're a long time apart, a lot of footballers, and after their careers finish, or if you move club and stuff, and it's great. I think the boys love actually being in each other's company again. As I say, I get back to that 2003, and they were through the back, and it was Martin and Petrov and Sutton, Moravcik, Henrik, Big Johan. And as much I kind of took a back seat, as much as I played with a few of those boys and they were my own teammates, it was very much what I imagine that group being under Martin O'Neill, which when I look back and the success they had, and I spoke to Martin recently about it when we had him over for something, they were close to, if they could have got through to the knockout at the Champions League with that team, and it was home and away, they could have done something. With Henrik and the likes of Sutton up top, they were a proper team, that Celtic team. And I said that to him, I would have liked to have been in that changing room. I don't know if I'd have played very much, but there were some real players, Petrovs and guys like that. But it was good to just see them all back together and the chemistry, and because it doesn't happen what you're a long time retired, as I say.
Yeah, I turned 30 when Martin came in. I think maybe I was 29. The second season, from my 30th birthday, we went to the Ajax away game in Amsterdam, which was a wonderful birthday party, wonderful result. But my son would have been born. I think he was actually born around the time John Barnes was announced as manager. But so he came through. He remembers Larson, and so for me it was a wonderful time. We ran a bus to every game back then before the cheap flights came in, and just the memories I have. And you say about going back and meeting old teammates. It's funny. Lads have moved to America that we would have been on the bus and that, and they come home maybe once or twice a year, and you get together with them, and the stories get embellished and they get better. So it is wonderful. But if you could go back, Simon, I have a time machine. I haven't used it in a while, but if you could climb into that time machine and go back to a moment in your Celtic career, would it take you back to that day? Or was there another highlight that just sticks out for you?
No, I would. That's the pinnacle for me. I was in a team making my debut, obviously, because that was my dream, to be a professional footballer. And I think I was at Celtic a year and a half before I got the opportunity to step onto the field as part of a first team as a sub at Easter Road. So that was my dream. And then it was, right, how do I keep myself in this team now? How do I go on to be established? And I was lucky enough to do that as well. But the scenes that day where there's a little bit of commentary that I don't know who it was on the radio at the end of the game, and they're kind of talking you through it, and then they pause just to let it go to the Celtic fans or singing "You'll Never Walk Alone." I can't remember who's doing the commentary, but it's amazing. It's amazing the scenes at the end were, because it meant so much to obviously stopping the 10, but then see on a personal level, I played against a bloody good Rangers side for the few seasons before, and you're having to take that year after year. You know, it was nice to stop it in an important season and be part of a team that won the league.
Magic. And will you be going as a fan to the game on Sunday, or will you be going as a media pundit?
I'm doing Celtic TV, so I've covered the games of late. I did the game at Ibrox for BBC, and then I did the Hampden game for BBC, so it's much easier to do it when Celtic are winning, so hopefully we get a positive result at the weekend.
Hopefully. Then just before I let you go, I know you're a big music fan like myself. Give me a good band to go and see. Who's coming up, or who have you seen recently? Or
the guy that I really like, well, various. I went to see the guy Sam Fender at the Barras just before the turn of the year. I thought he was great. I was listening to a lot of him, but there's a couple of Scottish bands, the Cartoons, that there's a young kid, Adam Frame, that plays in. Young band called Noise. These are two up and coming ones for me. And there's a guy called Mark Sharp and the Bicycle Thieves. They are also Celtic fans, so it also helps.
Was he at the Hydro gig?
Yes, yeah, and we've got the.
I think Martin I bumped into him in the bar.
Martin O'Neill's at the Armadillo on May the 29th, so there's still tickets on sale for that.
Oh, brilliant! If you send me the information, I'll get it out as well with the podcast in the description. So, I mean, it's been brilliant to talk to you, and it was great going down memory lane, and just that. Always is. That magic season.
That time machine needs to get used.
to get that magic season. Well, the last gig I was at was Texas in the Olympia Theatre in Dublin, and it was absolutely brilliant to get back in. And the next one is Paul Heaton and Deacon Blue outdoors in the
is that
summer.
A double? Paul Heaton and Deacon Blue?
Yeah, Deacon Blue, the support band. It's in St Anthony's. Is it St Anthony's? St Sutton Park anyway, in the north side of Dublin. So it's only up the road. So it was the clash with Ireland v Ukraine. So I was going to Paul Heaton, but I was getting a bit slagging off the boys I go to watch Ireland with. But it's now with the Ukrainian war, all the games have been moved. So
that'll be a good gig.
If we get the weather, it'll be magic. And we've had Paul on the podcast, and he's been absolutely brilliant with us. So Simon, thank you so much. I'm going to check out them bands. If you can just send me a message with them bands on it, and then all the details as well of the Hydro gig, the date and that, because Martin was a guest at the Willie Maley dinner in Celtic Park last week with Peter Martin. Was the host, and a packed house, and they brought the place down. It was just, Martin was just so, he was the star of the show in the Hydro, and he was the star of the show last week again.
He was really good. As I say, I've been lucky enough to be in his company through these gigs, and a really funny guy, clever guy, but good company.
Brilliant. Folks, Simon Donnelly, thank you, Simon, and hopefully we win on Sunday, and hopefully the league is wrapped up, and hopefully we have another great night in Glasgow.
Yeah, 100%.
Cheers, pal. Thank you so much.
Cheers, mate.